Coming up on Capital Crossfire, we invite GW students to discuss the Republican primary debate and the impending government shutdown.
Joining us today for our discussion, Nick Fattizzo, Logan Sedran, and Nick Hildebrand, moderated by Jacob Khabie.
I'm Vivian Williams.
And I'm Maria Condren.
From the GW TV studios in Washington, D.C., this is Capital Crossfire. On Wednesday, 7 Republican presidential candidates took the stage at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California, for the second Republican primary debate.
However, the Republican frontrunner, former President Donald Trump, was absent once again, leaving Nikki Haley, Chris Christie, Doug Burgum, Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, Mike Pence, and Tim Scott to debate on issues like immigration, China, the economy, and the auto workers' strike.
Meanwhile, the threat of a government shutdown continues to loom over millions of Americans, as the Republican-led Congress is failing to come to an agreement over bills that would fund several agencies, including the Department of Defense.
At the time of recording this episode, we are unsure of whether or not the government will actually shut down, or if House Republicans will be able to pull out a deal before the Sunday night deadline. However, all signs seem to indicate that a shutdown is imminent.
Today, to debate on the Republican primary debate and the government shutdown, we have...
On the left, Nick Fattizzo is a sophomore, double majoring in political science and history and minoring in psychology. He's a member of College Democrats, and he has worked for the Pennsylvania House of Representatives.
Nick Hildebrand is a sophomore majoring in international affairs. He is a member of the GW Parliamentary Debate Society.
On the right, Logan Sedran is a sophomore, double majoring in political science and economics. He's a member of College Republicans and Alpha Phi Omega, the national service fraternity. Now we take it to Jacob Khabie and our debaters Nick, Logan, and Nick.
Welcome all to today's debate. We're going to start with a very simple question about the Republican primary debate. Who do you think won the debate? Logan, we'll start with you.
I think Nikki Haley was probably the biggest winner. I felt like out of the whole field of candidates, everyone just kind of wanted their sound bites, and I felt like no one really could develop their own arguments. So I think she was able to get sound bites while still developing her argument, and she definitely attacked Ron DeSantis and Ramaswamy and kind of made them look, which I mean they're ahead of her in the polls. I think they kind of made her look, or she made herself look better than them.
Next.
Go ahead.
I think the biggest winner was by far Donald Trump. He is up 35 points in the polls. We're through 2 debates, and no one has really made any substantive attacks on him. No one's really gone after his record, his indictments, his age, his character, and for through 2 debates, and the best that the debaters come up is compare him to a Disney character. So I think far and away, Trump won the debate because he still demonstrated the grip he has on the party. The other candidates are just scared to go after him because they know that the very voters they're trying to recruit still hold very high opinions of the former president. And look, he has 91 indictments, so anything can change, but he has a commanding lead in the race, and I dare everyone else is competing for second best at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Nikki Haley definitely came out in front, and I think that the lead Donald Trump has is significant, and in a debate he didn't show up for, where the main goal was, like you guys were saying, grabbing sound bites. A lot of it seems that by staying out of it, he really saved himself. I think also that, what we saw up there, that kind of infighting, is just representative of the greater issue at a whole. But I think overall, Nikki Haley really was able to come out of it. And if the best thing that they're going to leverage against her is an issue with curtains from when she was at state, they really don't have a lot to go off of.
Yeah, so you guys actually just touched on our next question. Polls continue to show that Donald Trump is the front runner despite not showing up to either debate. What does this say about the state of the Republican Party and the strength of the candidates who did show up?
Well, I think that the strength of the candidates who really did show up is mostly determined by who was able to kind of get out in front early and show that they were there not only for kind of that soundbite and for that sort of shock value, but also to deliver substance. I think after, 4 years of a Trump presidency and then 4 years of, a world in which kind of those same insults are being hurled now at President Biden by Republicans, almost a flipping of the script, what's really going to matter is who is going to deliver on issues people care about. And I think Trump leaving the debate and showing up at the auto workers union in the same style as Biden really just drives that home.
I definitely still think that this is Trump's party. I don't think that anyone is going, I don't think that any like kind of establishment Republican is going to be able to break through, like through the field. And like when you see on the debate, like everyone, I mean, no one like besides Chris Christie, like really wants to attack Donald Trump because it's just going to hurt their poll numbers. And I think that that definitely shows like the state of the Republican Party is that people really are just going to support Trump. I mean, presumably until he dies.
I would agree with Logan on this one. I don't think the candidates on stage are necessarily unqualified. We've had governors, senators, vice presidents. These are very much in past elections. Voters will be looking at the people who've had this experience to be the next president. And yet, as Logan said, I don't see how it's that consequential. Trump's got a huge lead. He didn't even lose the first two primaries because even like he is currently polling in those quite well. But if he were to somehow lose momentum there, I would still favor him. Just because I still think he's got the core tendency of the Republican Party still under his grip. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with the candidates. I mean, if we were having this conversation 6-9 months ago, it would be, ooh, DeSantis, he's Trump without the baggage. And yet, once he's down the campaign stage, he's faltered time and time again. So, until something changes, maybe conviction or health issue or who knows what else, this is Trump's race to lose and Trump's party to lose.
I think that like really right now what the candidates in like the Republican debate need to do is just kind of hold out until the indictments and the trials happen. Because I think that once that happens, I mean, Trump is going to like look really bad. I mean, yes, like the indictments have garnered him like some support, but I think that like once he's like in trial and like he's missing campaign rallies and he can't be out there, he has to be in the courtroom. I think that that's definitely going to like hurt him.
All right. Nick, I want to ask you guys a follow-up question. Do you think a conviction will actually hurt Donald Trump's campaign?
I would like to think so, but I'm not sure. And I'll be honest, look, Donald Trump it's possible that he could be convicted, be serving a prison sentence, and then become the next president of the United States. I think with Trump voters, I don't think a conviction is going to necessarily think, oh, he's a bad guy now. It's, oh, the left, big government have basically called in a hit on our leader. And so I think, if anything, a conviction will galvanize those kind of voters. On the other hand, if we're talking moderate Republicans, independents, those undecided, if you're seeing that someone who's supposed to be leading the free world and the greatest country on earth be convicted of a felony, it could be more than one. I mean, it's not 91 to choose from. I would certainly think that plays a role in the voting decision process, but I'd say too early to call. But look, Trump, if he were to win, he was going to need to win. Pick up independent voters in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, and I don't see how conviction helps him in that sense. So maybe this would be a pretty big blow to him, but at the same time, I could easily see it drive up turnout for his base.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think, with a conviction, like you were saying, there can be galvanizing along that kind of or within that cult of personality that he's generated. But when you look at voters who are voting, they're voting along party lines. They've been conservatives their entire life. They are voting for, personal interests or like to conserve their own personal wealth. Like there's a lot of factors here. And, for the law and order party, there's not a lot of law and order there. And so I think it really can amplify the messaging of that cult of personality. But when you look at it, at large, there's a lot of independent and kind of habitual conservatives who I think might be scared away by that.
Logan, do you have anything to add?
I just think, I agree, I think that's where he loses. Yes, he's going to get his support, he's going to have his parties, the people who love Trump are still going to go out and vote for Trump no matter what happens. But he doesn't need the people who love Trump to win the election. He needs the people in Pennsylvania, in Arizona, in Georgia, these people in the middle, these independents. And I don't think that an indictment or a trial is going to make him look good enough to capture those voters.
All right, let's move on then. As I'm sure you guys saw when you guys watched the debate, these debates have a tendency to devolve into screaming matches in which no one is heard. Should there be a harsher penalty for candidates who talk over each other or go over time?
I mean,
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Any of you could start.
I don't think that there should be harsher penalties. I think the way to alleviate that is to condense the debates. Like, we have 7 people up on this debate stage. Who was it? The North Dakota governor, Doug Burgum, and Mike Pence. They're polling like not statistically significant. Why are they on the debate stage? You know what I mean? Like, if we cut off like these ends, like where people, like no one's going to vote for Chris Christie, no one's going to vote for Doug, no one's voting for Pence or Scott. These people shouldn't be on the debate stage. Yes, you know, we need to have like multiple voices to like have multiple perspectives like shared, but it just doesn't work. And like when you have so many people, I don't know. I think it makes the debate not good.
Yeah, there's a lot of voices. They need to learn how to cut the mics. Like, if people, there should be structure to a debate. I think that, like, what we're doing here, which is, like, respectful and, you know, there's exchange, that is very different from just going at each other to the point where your moderators are yelling over you and arguing with you.
But these moderators, they didn't really. I mean, these moderators honestly kind of sucked.
Yeah,
they did not corral. Like, they did not even attempt to like rein everyone in.
For a very rowdy field, there was very little control. I think in part you have to look at the debate. I think there are situations where, you know, just cutting your candidate's mic is not appropriate if they're trying to say something. But there were so many instances where we were watching and just thinking, like, why are they still talking? That I think, you know, at least some sort of structure or at least a better understanding of the rules is going to be needed going forward.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I would love to see the moderators or whoever controlling the mics cut them off when, you know, when we're having interruptions for like 3 minutes solid with no substantive policies or questions answered. And I agree with you, Logan, that the field needs to be thinned. I mean, I think I'd say at least 4 candidates. I mean, Burgum, Scott, Pence, I think they know that their campaigns hit the iceberg and that they're going down fast, and I think that kind of explains why they had to be so aggressive and on the front foot, because they realized if they didn't make the lasting impression on this debate, there might not be much left of a campaign for them. So I understand, like, the mindset of why, like, Doug Burgum every 30 seconds try to jump in and say, I'm governor of North Dakota, but, like, at this point, I think for Republicans and the country, I think debate of Ramaswamy, DeSantis, maybe Christie, Haley, and maybe ideally Trump. I think that would be a more conducive debate to actually talking about policies and getting a better understanding of where these candidates, who I think those are the 5 who could maybe, just maybe, be considered competitive. I think if we had a debate of those 5, it would be pretty interesting to watch.
All right. We're going to wrap this up with some policy that was discussed at the debate. Vivek Ramaswamy and Chris Christie both said that they would support a parent's right to know if their child comes out as trans at school. What are the implications of this policy, both when it comes to the safety of queer children and also privacy in schools?
I think an important note to that is that the idea that gender identity, being characterized as a mental illness on the debate, was entirely false. And so by framing it in that way, they made it an issue of they framed it in a way where it's a teacher telling a parent that something is wrong with their child, but that's just not the case. That's not something that's wrong. And so I don't think that's a feasible or ethical policy to pursue, because we put so much value on, for one, a child's right to privacy. We put a lot more emphasis on it than an adult's right to privacy. And so making sure that, there are protections for not just, privacy for kids' data or for what they're writing, but also how they feel safe in their identities is important. You can't legislate that.
I was going to say that, I don't know, this is kind of a tricky area, but I sort of disagree with you. I don't think that I think that kids, when they come out as gay or they come out as trans, really early on, when they're essentially kids and can't make, I don't know, clear decisions for themselves about adulthood. This is a very adult subject. I think that parents have a right to know that their kids are thinking that way, and I think parents need to come in and address that. I don't agree that in high school and beyond that should be a requirement. But I think that, I don't know, parents need to be allowed to be parents in that situation, especially when it comes to like young children. But like when you come into like middle school and like high school, I would like to see a little bit more privacy, because I feel like that's like when you realize that you are trans, like when you genuinely believe that you are gay, like that's when it happens, and like that's when you need to like be protected, not in elementary schools.
Yeah. Do you guys have any response?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're talking older grades, like, I think it's very interesting that the Republican Party has several issues where they frame themselves as, oh, we're here to protect kids. Like, they've done that with several issues, and they've tried to do it with this one, and yet I think that the message falls flat. I don't see how it's protecting a child when you're denying their identity, which they, especially in older grades, have every right to express, and can't really consider, oh, honey, you're just confused. So I find it interesting to say that Republicans are trying to frame it as, oh, we care about the kids, and yet this policy could very easily, and I think we've seen cross country, can harm children, in fact. So I find the dissonance there interesting.
Mm-hmm. We're going to switch it up to the government shutdown. The federal government will lapse in appropriations starting at 12:01 a.m. Sunday, September 30th, with a continuing resolution of the passage of 12 appropriation bills. What, if anything, do you think can be done to avoid a shutdown? How likely do you think the shutdown? Is, and how long do you think it will last?
I think it is imminent. I don't think that there's like really a way to avoid it. And I know like people are quick to like go to blame the, MAGA Republicans and like the far right camp. Like it is essentially like partially their fault, but I think the bigger person to blame for like this government shutdown is Kevin McCarthy. I think that he's power hungry. I think that was evident when he went to, 13 or 15 ballots, 15 ballots to become speaker. He just wanted power. He made a deal with the MAGA Republicans saying, you can control me and I get to be speaker. And now they're controlling him, and he's like, why can't I be speaker? Like, he's not being like allowed to do his job, but that was the deal. The MAGA Republicans put up other people, not even from their own camp. I mean, they put up Steve Scalise, the whip from Louisiana. They put up other people that from like the main bloc that they would like to see. And I think that, sorry, I lost my train of thought. But I just think that it's Kevin McCarthy's fault. I think that he just wants to maintain power, and he's willing to put his own power ambitions ahead of like actually helping like America.
Yeah, pushing 12 appropriations bills through over the weekend is not feasible. If I had to guess, I would say there's going to be like a shutdown on Monday, because there's no way that they're pushing all of them through that fast. And I think what you're saying about McCarthy being power hungry might be true. I think it's also important to consider, though, the fact that in making that bargain, it's hard for us to characterize what that promise looks like. And so as he's pinned sort of by this more extreme right flank in the House, he's put in a position where he needs to let the government shut down so that he can come off scot-free. And I think you're right. I think he's trying to protect his image a lot, but it's less about kind of continuing to amass power in the House, and rather just, he's realizing what it's looking like now. And, I think the shutdown is going to last as long as it takes for him to convince his right flank that there's nothing else he can do.
Mm-hmm. I don't think he even necessarily needs to convince the right flank. I think he could come together with Hakeem Jeffries and like moderate Democrats to try to put make some sort of compromise. But he won't do that because his right flank is threatening to impeach him. If he genuinely wanted to care about America, he would go to the Democrats, he would try to make a deal, and he would forsake his speakership so that he could, help the country.
Yeah.
Could I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
Do you think he's going to come out of the shutdown still Speaker of the House?
I think it's hard to say. I think it really honestly depends on if the MAGA Republicans want or get what they want. If they do get what they want, then yes, I think he'll retain his speakership. But I don't see a way in which they get what they want and the bill also passes. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure that he can. Mm-hmm. I think it also shows just a lot of weak leadership on his point that he can't push something as basic through the House.
Yeah. Nick, I want to ask you to follow up on that. What do you think of the speakership of Kevin McCarthy? Who's to blame for the shutdown?
I think Kevin McCarthy's to blame. I think he's been a poor speaker. Obviously, we don't know the details of the reported deal that he made with the moderate Republicans to lend himself to the speakership, but I can only assume it involved trading away at least a portion of his power, or at least having some sort of quid pro quo when we got down to these spending deadlines and potential government shutdowns. And look, I think this demonstrates, McCarthy's leadership demonstrates the larger problem in the Republican Party. They can't govern effectively. The Democrat-controlled Senate has spending bills ready to go. They're ready to go. They've reached out to Kevin McCarthy saying, hey, look, we've compromised with moderate Republicans in the Senate. We've come to some agreement that will work. Like, it can pass in the Senate. We're just waiting for you. And he's refused because he knows, well, if I do that, I would love to do that, but that means I'm out of a job because my moderate, like the Boberts, the Gateses of the world, are going to raise an article for removal from the speakership, and he's trying to be Rep. McCarthy instead of Speaker McCarthy, which is not in his best interest. So he's prepared to let the entire government shut down to prove a point and to save his skin, which I think is an abomination to American government, and I think shows the weakness in the Republican Party that, look, we want to pretend to be the serious party, like we want to point out all the things that happen to Democrats that we don't like, that some of the socialists use and some of the shenanigans, and yet the Republican Party can't run their government. So I blame McCarthy fully.
They sent Republicans home. Like, they did not expect to be able to find a resolution to it, despite what you were just mentioning about the Senate. And the kind of act in that, and I think, the way this has gone over the past week signals to me that Kevin McCarthy will do as much as he possibly can to keep his speakership. I think he'll retain it, and I think in part because right now Democrats are more comfortable with the devil they know than one they don't. And so I think on the Republican side, there's definitely a risk of him getting pushed out. I don't think it's unlikely that there wouldn't be, Democratic-like pushback, either, quietly or more vocally through, public channels to kind of retain that. Because, we've heard about it in other crises, we've heard about it in other kind of motions that have gone through, significant motions, that McCarthy and Biden, however strained, do have a working relationship. And, I think if I were in kind of Democratic leadership shoes, I would want to hold on to that connection. So I think Speaker McCarthy might have an interesting bit of protection from the left side that he's not expecting, though.
All right, we're going to move on to the next question. Hundreds of federal government employees will be furloughed or work without pay if the government shuts down. This shutdown, depending on the length, will also have a negative impact on the economy, which affects everyday Americans. What will be the political cost of the shutdown to Republicans and Democrats? Is Joe Biden to blame at all for this?
Well, as the president, Joe Biden is not the one who writes the bills or sends them to the House. He has stated that he would sign, appropriations bills. He'd stated that he will sign and fund the government. I think that the extent of cooperation with which House Republicans expect Democrats to kind of cooperate is unrealistic, and there have already been significant cuts in there just that have been approved to keep the government going. But I think the political cost is, it's that of reputation, what we were just talking about with the speakership and kind of protection from both left and right flanks, or, aggression in there. And the costs of that are really going to be, put on Kevin McCarthy because he has not found a way to redirect this blame away from himself.
I think that this is definitely going to hurt Republicans. We already see just like in very initial polls that like Democrats, it looks like they're probably going to take back the House. I can't imagine that like beyond or like after this that there's a way that like Republicans can bounce back from it. The economy is already definitely hurting, and people can't really take much more. If you add the inflation plus government employees who like don't have a paycheck, it's just going to be disastrous. And I think Republicans are definitely going to be the ones to blame for that because they can't get any bill through.
I definitely agree. Democrats have shown that they are trying to be the adults in the room, and yet Republicans aren't willing to play ball with them. So I think if you're asking yourself, like if you're one of these unemployed federal workers or just in general you're having very negative effects from a shutdown, you have to be asking, well, okay, Republicans, you could have prevented this. This wasn't a foregone conclusion. We're at this state because of some very complex political gamesmanship that honestly should not be going on because of the detriment of the country. So I think the voters have to ask themselves, well, why would I support Republicans in upcoming, like you mentioned, House elections next year, when last term they demonstrate we can't run the House effectively? Why should I support Republicans when they claim to be caring about me against Biden inflation, and yet they shut down the government, which now put me out of a job? So I think squarely blame falls on Republicans. I did imagine a world where somehow Republicans can try and blame Biden because he didn't compromise on his reckless spending enough, but I think that's a very half-hearted and won't land effort. So I think I've said it and I'll say it again. The blame falls on Republicans who have demonstrated they cannot govern effectively.
And I think that Democrats are going to support Democrats and Republicans are going to support Republicans. Really what you need is like the middle independents. And I think that the independents right now are looking at the Republicans being like, we tried to trust you and you've proven that you can't, because like this is just like another like circus. I mean, the whole speakership, the 15 ballots, that, and then now you have this government shutdown, and like where will it end? How much more are we going to have of this for another year? And I think it's just going to turn a lot of independents, which Republicans desperately need, I think it's just going to turn them off.
Yeah, I will say, I feel like we've been, characterizing both parties with very broad strokes based on kind of the actors that have come to light most prevalently in like what we're seeing kind of now, here and now. And I think that there are a lot of Republicans who are not happy with what's going on. And I think, we just heard about Mitt Romney's departure, and he kind of made that call about how it's time to move on for a younger generation. And I think, there's obviously the call about age in there, but I think it also really emphasizes the importance of, being able to like move on as parties, not characterizing the other side as their worst actors. And I just think it's important to keep that in mind when we think about kind of where the political blame and the costs are going to fall, because it will fall on these figureheads, but they are associated with so many people on both sides who just want to do their jobs.
All right, then we'll move on to our last question. Moments before the shoot, we did receive breaking news that Senator Diane Feinstein of California has died at age 90. For the last couple of months, there's been some controversy about Feinstein's refusal to step down despite her failing health. Now it's on Governor Gavin Newsom to find a replacement for Feinstein before the 2024 election. Should Feinstein have listened to calls for her to step down? Is this indicative of a larger issue in the Senate?
Yes, I think she definitely should have stepped down, but honestly, I don't think it was her call to make. We saw towards the end, we had her as advisors essentially telling her which way to vote. I don't think that she was in any mental capacity to, like, one way or the other to, like, make that call. I think it does point to, like, a larger issue in the Senate where, you just have, like, these really old people who, like, despite, any gaffes that they have, they're just, like, they want to maintain power. I don't agree with that.
Yeah. Well, like I was just saying about Mitt Romney, like there's obviously, the sentiment among some representatives and among some actors that there does need to be a shift to the next generation of political leaders. I think on the issue of Feinstein, at that point, I feel like when you are that old, like it's time to step down. I don't think that, it justified maybe an emergency call down like some people were talking about, but I think, in the previous election, and for, any of the other politicians who are in her shoes in their upcoming elections, they really need to consider the fact that this could happen to them while they're in office, and they are going to be left in a position of vulnerability for both their party and their legacy if they do so.
Before I say what I'm about to say, I just want to acknowledge the trailblazing career Senator Feinstein had, and serving for over 30 years, leading figure for women's representation in the Senate, so I just want to acknowledge and appreciate that. But unquestionably, she should have resigned. I don't really quite understand what the impetus is for continuing to serve in the United States Senate at the age of 90 on a political or a personal level, so she absolutely should have resigned. And yes, this is indicative of a larger age problem. We've heard the term gerontocracy thrown around, and I think it makes a lot of sense. How much of the gain of age is over 70? Like, did Durbin used to be fine? Is that, Trask is 89, right? And I think when Congress has to regulate such broad and upcoming issues like AI, a new economy, a new green economy, climate change, gun control, that honestly were not huge problems when they probably first started serving in, say, the 80s or 90s, I think that really hamstrings Congress's ability, and therefore the United States' ability, to tackle the biggest issues facing our country, which I think you could argue is a sign of decline. I'm not here to poo-poo the United States, and yet there are so many issues that this country needs to tackle, and yet Congress, I think, partially due to age, is unwilling and unable to do so.
All right. Well, thank you all for a great debate today. Once again, I'm Jacob Khabie, your moderator for this debate. That's all the time we have here today, and we will return to Maria and Vivian to hear from our fact check team.
Logan said that Pence and Burgum do not have statistically significant polls. Pence has 6% and Burgum has under 1%.
Logan also said that Kevin McCarthy went to either 13 or 15 ballots to become Speaker. It was, in fact, 15 ballots.
Nick Hildebrand referenced that Nikki Haley allocated $50,000 to curtains in the UN ambassador residence. However, this is false, as this decoration was done during the Obama administration, before Haley's time in the UN. Well, that's all for this episode of Capital Crossfire.
Be sure to check us out online at www.gwtv.com and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at GW Capital Crossfire.
For all of us at GWTV, I'm Vivian.
And I'm Maria.
Thanks for getting caught in the crossfire with us.
We'll see you back here next time.